I feel like you always say welcome to the Cupful podcast. I feel
After
like
the music.
I should get to say welcome to the Cupful podcast.
Okay, sure. If you want to bring us into the proper podcast, we're going to get right down to business this time, I think, and not dilly-dally.
Or should I say welcome to the Spookful podcast?
It's not spookful.
It's not spookful?
No. Creepful.
Creepful. Welcome. Welcome to the Cupful podcast.
You mean the Creepful podcast, because all month this month we are telling spooky, creepy stories. And the creepiest thing that we had in last week's episode was, we just kind of talked about. I feel like last week we were on the verge of greatness at points where we were like really getting into some topics, and then we just completely derailed ourselves.
We really just scratched the surface of some of the things we were trying to talk about. So I'm really excited to go deeper into kind of what we were trying to talk about last week.
I mean, that's not what this episode is about, but we can kind of.
No, it is. I had a big question last week whether or not you believe in paranormal activity.
And I gave like a half-assed answer.
Yeah, it was a half-assed answer. So we definitely, we're
going to get into that a little bit.
We'll get into that a little more.
The point of today's episode, Kandace and I are each, we are dueling here. We are having a competition, wink, unwink. Unwink's not a thing.
Wink, wink.
We are having a story competition in which we have both looked into some just kind of spooky, haunted tales. And we are going to be reading them to each other and kind of just breaking down the story and the history of it a little bit. And I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm excited about it.
Well, what's fun is neither of us know, I don't think, the story that the other one has researched.
No,
we haven't told it to each other.
Told Kandace the name of like the place, but I don't think that gives away anything. I don't think she's ever heard of it.
Yeah, so these are all raw reactions.
Yeah.
So we'll be reading each of our stories that we've researched to one another, getting reactions, and I really think that listeners should tell us who wins or which story they like the best.
Yeah, I mean, and we have finally figured out the whole show notes thing. We do have links in the show notes that you can find us and reach out to us, give us suggestions. Please do, listeners. And while you're at it, like whatever platform you're listening to this on, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, give us the thumbs up or the heart, or subscribe or follow us, or whatever the hell you need to do to make sure that every week, or at least the weeks that we're releasing episodes, you're getting this and you're staying up to date on all of the entertainment that Justin and Kandace have to offer. Last week, I kind of mentioned already that we were on the cusp of greatness with a few of our topics. And I think that there's just one thing that I need to redeem for both Kandace and I from last week. We got on the topic of like found footage horror films and just like our like horror films in general. And somehow we managed to only mention Paranormal Activity. And the first two of those movies are fun. And I wouldn't say that like I hated any of the ones that came after that. But those are not really like, when I think like, for me, like found footage horror, I think of like, the VHS series. I think of The Taking of Deborah Logan, which is a very haunting film. It's not like there are some really good, As Above, So Below. There are some really, really good ones in the genre. I love the genre. It's very near and dear to my heart. I feel like it's kind of burnt out a little bit, but
it's overdone in recent years, and it has gotten a little stale just because people haven't been doing it differently or anything new. There was a recent, I think in the last year, a Netflix series that came out that had some found footage elements to it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you
what
remember?
Was that called? It was something 88 or something. It had I feel like it had the number 8 in the title.
We'll have to, you'll have to look that up. It was definitely worth watching if you enjoy, things that have found footage. It was pretty creepy series. Justin's looking it up right now.
Archive 81.
That's right.
Archive 81. And the whole thing was based around this guy. He's a tape collector, and like he restores VHS tapes. And this collection of tapes comes into his possession, and it unravels a mystery. And there's some fucking weird like time travel shenanigans happening. There's just crazy occult things. Like it's a messed up series, and I highly recommend watching it because it was one of those like sleeper Netflix series where like Netflix does a horrible job of marketing all of their stuff.
They just drop these bangers and like don't warn anybody.
So,
like they have great content that they're just like, here you go.
Yeah, it was a really, really, really cool series though. Definitely, a good solid 10 episodes if you like, just creepy horror stuff.
Especially for this time of year.
Exactly.
It's a great watch.
But yeah, I just wanted to kind of like, we kind of came across as just like horror noobs last week.
We're trying to redeem ourselves a little bit.
Because like it left a bad taste in my mouth even. We're not just like, oh yeah, we watched the Paranormal Activities.
Like it.
We saw Blair Witch
one time.
and like, no, like we dive, like we have a Shudder account. We dive into the shit. Now, I will say that there are people out there that are really, really, really into those kind of like low budget, like shot on video movies from like the 90s and yesteryear. But I wouldn't say that we're quite there, but we do dabble.
Yeah, we definitely dabble.
In that. And I enjoy like a just, really crappy horror film every once in a while. I mean, I don't know. There's so many out there. But
they're the best ones sometimes.
And sometimes they're the best ones to watch with our kids because, they're not usually like too spooky. They're just so ridiculous.
And they have some humor to them. So they're not so scary.
Not that this is in any way, because this was kind of like more of a Hollywood blockbuster style film. But we watched Krampus with the kids just a few minutes ago. We just got done watching Krampus. And that was kind of just it's a stupid film. Like none of us had seen it somehow. It's been out since 2015.
It really put me in the Christmas mood.
I don't think that was the intention. It's Halloween season, baby. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoy watching stupid movies like that. And there's other ones that I would really like to watch with the kids. Like we've watched, and this is another kind of like pseudo Halloween, pseudo Christmas film, but like Gremlins is another one that's like, it's just fun. It's like spooky fun. There's creatures, like there's a knockoff called Critters. I would love to like show to the kids at some point, probably. And there's just like, I don't know, bad movies like that. Not all of them are like, you don't want to watch all of those with your kids. Like I can think of a few. And did you ever see the movie Thanksgiving?
I think you tried to make me watch that one year.
So it's about this turkey that just straight up like tries to murder some motherfuckers on Thanksgiving.
It's awful. It's all coming back to me. I tried to block it out of my memory, but here we are.
There is legit oh my gosh, usually I try to like save these heavier topics that'll probably push our listeners away until the end of the episode. But there's straight up a scene where this puppet turkey in this terrible, god awful film. It's so much fun. I'm pretty sure there's a scene where he's like raping somebody, like a person, a girl.
That's awful.
And he's like, gobble, gobble, motherfucker. And like has this like line, like, and I'm just like, what the fuck is happening?
No wonder I blocked this out of my memory. That's awful.
There's so many like just awful films like that out there. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Like, oh man, there's a level below bad horror film. You need to go down into that level. And that's where the good shit is.
Just not around your kids.
Yeah, not around your kids.
Yeah, don't watch
it first and then.
Screen it and then decide. Like Krampus was okay for the kids. They were on board.
But yeah, I just kind of wanted to redeem ourselves a little bit from last week because like I was like, oh man, all of our one listeners think that we're complete horror noobs now.
We named all the like very stereotypical horror films, but
we've talked. I mean, we've already if you've listened to our podcast long enough, we've talked about like the classics, my obsession with Freddy Krueger and stuff like that. We've talked about that enough. Like we didn't need to touch on that last year.
Justin is Freddy Krueger.
I am Freddy Krueger. At least that's what the nuns at my Catholic school in kindergarten would have told you. But anyway, yeah, I kind of want to just I wanted to hit on that a little bit. I also, like last week we tended. I feel like I kind of like derailed the conversation about, whether or not I believed in the paranormal. I don't always know how to answer that. So I feel like I deflected by like just kind of going into like my religious beliefs and, like just to kind of go back to that conversation. It's not that I don't believe in the paranormal. I'm very much just kind of like double down. Like I'm very much a seeing as believing kind of person. I need to experience it. And I don't think that I've ever really experienced anything that can't be explained. So I don't know. That's where I'm at with it. Just to kind of, I don't know, lead into this conversation that we're about to have. So like we've already said, today's episode is a special edition, and we might do more of these in the future if this goes well. I'm pretty excited about it. But yeah, Candace and I have both looked into a story.
I hope we do more of these because I had so much fun researching.
And it might not even be like necessarily like spooky stories in the future. Like we might, like there could be some folklore based around Christmas, like in sometime in December that we do, or spooky Christmas. I don't know. I just like spooky shit.
Spooky Christmas.
Maybe we'll have some special true crime episodes.
It may not be spooky, but it may be spooky Christmas.
Spooky Christmas. Because Halloween never really ends. If you believe hard enough and you want it hard enough, Halloween is there. It's the gift that keeps on giving, Clark.
Well, I think the most fun part about it for me was the history involved in some of the things I was looking up. I'm a huge history nerd, so anything that involves looking up, the history of things that I had no clue about before, super fun in itself. So that was just rewarding. So even if I don't win and people, if everyone thinks your story is better, that's fine because I had a good time.
I mean, here's the thing. The story is not mine. This is
right.
These are real stories that we've researched, and the delivery of it's going to be a little different. That doesn't mean that any one of them's better than the other, but definitely tell us which one you preferred.
Tell us who wins.
It's funny. In the last episode, I did say like, oh, well, Candace is probably going to do all this research and stuff, and I'm going to probably come in on the day of and just like kind of like half-ass it. That's actually not how it ended up being this week. I feel like I've spent the last 2 or 3 days now kind of like hardcore, like getting home from work and really diving into this. And I was, to get myself in the mood, I was like sitting out in a chair outside, just kind of like, soaking up all of the fall weather and stuff. And had my computer out there playing like spooky, like ambient noise music. And just kind of like researching and writing my notes and everything.
That's so fun.
And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing it. At one point, one of our neighbors came out and he was like, "Hey, you working or playing?" Because I had my computer, like my laptop in my lap. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't really know how to answer him, but I was like, I'm not really working, but I'm going to say that I'm working so that you leave me alone. So that I can finish this. Not that I didn't want to talk to you, but I was really in the zone. And when you get in the zone, the auto zone, you keep going. I don't know. But
so what story are you reading for us today?
That was Candace's way of saying like, you're rambling. Just get on with it. Cue the atmospheric, spooky sound music. I don't know. I might play something in the background, might not. It might be too distracting. Ooh, no. That's I'm not going down a Friday the 13th rabbit hole right now. We're gonna get into this.
Sorry about that. Distracted you.
Candace knows how to like get me off topic, and I will ramble about some slasher flicks.
Okay, I am on the edge of my seat. I'm waiting to hear your story.
As far back in your seat as you could possibly go. This haunt is set in Mitchell, a small town in southern Indiana, inside of an old Victorian-era home on the quiet street of Warren. From the outside, this looks like any other turn-of-the-century Hoosier home. On the inside, there are patterned drapes covering stained glass windows, wooden poster beds, and crystal chandeliers that transport you to a time long past. But according to many, it has a history that is still very much alive. Welcome to the Whispers Estate.
Ooh.
I'm not going to read all of this like line for line like that. I really wanted to deliver like to set up that atmosphere.
That gave me a chill. I can picture like where you are.
So we wanted to kind of focus on stories that were, kind of close to home and an extent. And Mitchell, Indiana is actually a southern Indiana town, not close to where I grew up. It's still a story that I'm familiar with. And it's kind of one of those things like you hear different renditions of it depending on who's telling. It's cool. It's Indiana folklore. So we kind of wanted to focus on something that was, close to home. And I, as we've talked about in previous episodes, like I mostly lived in Indiana growing up.
So this is one that's close to you.
Kinda, yeah. Really, the ones that are really close to me are like nothing special. Like we, oh man, all right, we'll talk. We'll get back to this. Because I want to. We jumped into it. I want to get going. So yes, we were talking about a Victorian-era home that was built in, what was it, in 1894 in Mitchell, Indiana. So this story is a blend of historical fact and local legend come together to paint the tragic tale of Dr. John Gibbons and his wife, Jessie. Whispers Estate, like I just said, was built in 1894 by another physician, Dr. George White. Dr. Gibbons and his wife would purchase the home just a few years later in 1899. Most likely the home was already being used as a physician's office, so it made sense for the young doctor who was trying to establish his career to kind of set up shop there. He was, like very early in his career, just trying to get up and going. And it made sense. Small towns like that in those days, I don't know what exactly happened to the other doctor to either leave town or sell his house, or maybe he died. I couldn't find record of that. But there was a nice setup for him to kind of just move into this house that doubled as a doctor's office and operate from there.
So his realtor asked him, what are you looking for? A 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom? And he's like, I'm looking for a house that fits a physician.
I'm looking for a house. Like, it has to fit a physician and a gateway to hell. It's got to have that.
Oh, you just threw it out there.
I mean, I don't think that there's really a gateway to hell in the story, but you never know.
Oh, okay. You got me excited for a minute. I was like, wow.
We'll
okay.
See. Maybe I'm just really good at backwalking my spoilers.
So yeah, he found the perfect real estate.
He did. And did they even have realtors in 1899?
It was probably more. I feel like they didn't call them realtors, but I'm sure that they did have some sort of banker, some sort of.
A lot of people in most towns, they're probably building their homes or on a homestead, or no, this is Victorian-era. They're buying homes.
Yeah, they're buying homes.
I mean, this guy bought a house from someone else, so
right.
Makes sense. Dr. Gibbons ran his practice out of a first floor room. And it's believed that he often performed surgery in the home, as this was a small town, and at the time hospitals weren't as accessible. So if there was a doctor in town who had an office and something came, like there was an accident, like you brought them there to that home, and he would operate. Evidence points to the bathroom off the first floor room where he was practicing out of as being the operating room for surgery. There was a drain built in the middle of the floor, large windows for natural light, which is obviously uncommon for bathrooms. You don't want to see, in the plain light of day, people watching you take a shit.
Right.
So
you're saying this is a modern day bathroom, like it's a bathroom now, or it was a bathroom then?
It was a bathroom then. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
No, this was intended as a bathroom. And
okay.
One of the things that leads to people to think are, like I said, like he bought this from another physician. It was probably built for the purpose of being an operating room, just happened to have like bathroom facilities because it does double as a house in it. So it was probably built with this in mind.
Okay.
So drain in the floor. Obviously, what goes down that drain.
Right. Blood and guts.
Fluids.
Yeah.
Bodily fluids.
Juices.
And then, it had the tall, large windows with letting in a lot of natural light because, we had light bulbs, but electricity was very expensive, very scarce, even at this point. And it was decorated with these black and white tilings that had gold flakes, which was very common for doctors' offices at this point of time. So that was another thing that kind of led people to believe that this was the operating room. Back in this time, it wasn't very common to really specialize in any one type of practice as a physician. It was kind of like where we were starting to get into having specialists and doctors because we were actually having these hospitals that had people, that were doing different things. So he wasn't technically a specialist, but he did tend to work a lot more in pediatrics, kind of with children. And this love of children is what led Dr. Gibbons and his wife, Jessie, to adopt several orphan children over the years. So they didn't have any kids of their own. They adopted either abandoned or orphaned children. So there are 3 kids that are commonly referenced, being Rachel, Elizabeth, and Helen. Sometimes there's a 4th named Enos, which is actually the biological...
Excuse me, who?
Enos.
Enos?
Enos, not anus. Enos.
How do you spell that?
Enus. Enos.
Okay.
Yeah. So Enos was... Enos is... So in some of the stories that I was finding... he was mentioned, some he wasn't. So what I was finding on him, they were saying that he was the brother of Rachel, which was the first name that I mentioned, like the biological brother.
Okay.
So they adopted them both out. And these 3 kids, like they may or may not have ever even existed. I'm just going to throw that out there now because,
So there's no actual documentation?
There is only documentation of one of them having been adopted by the Gibbons. And the only reason that particular one is documented is because they were they were in the obituary for both Jessie and John Gibbons when they died. She was mentioned in the obituary because she
Spoiler
survived.
alert.
She was alive up till 1994, actually.
Wow.
So born in 1910, lived to 1994, 84 years old.
I don't know why that seems like impossible.
That seems so crazy, but yeah, I mean, you literally have a grandpa who's like that age now.
Yeah, that's just wild to me.
So there's only, of all these stories, there's only one child that is actually confirmed via obituaries and a 1920 census that was taken. But back in those times, record taking was like it was all over the place. And, it really could have been a number of things that like could have easily erased somebody from just history. I mean, it happens a lot. Record keeping is just crap back then. It's not as big of a worry for people to keep accurate records. So yeah, I'm gonna go with like the way that I'm telling the story though, and a lot of the legend and lore. This is where like historical facts and legend kind of like blend, and that's kind of what I'm going with in this story. We're gonna focus on 3 kids. Rachel would have been the first kid, according to legend, that they adopted. They adopted her around 1910 or so. She would have been about 8 years old, I think, at the time that they adopted her. And yeah, so I mean, everything seems up to this point, everything seems set for them to have like a happy home. They are adopting kids. They're, like his medical practice is going. This would unfortunately not be the outcome, though. Sometime around Christmas, 1912, their daughter Rachel was 10 years old. Rachel was sneaking around the house in the middle of the night. She goes into the front parlor, which is kind of a sitting room area. She goes into the front parlor, which is where they had their Christmas tree. She closes the pocket door behind her and sneaks over to the tree to try and, get a peek at her Christmas gifts. While she's snooping, she hears a noise from upstairs. Fearing that her parents have woken up and that she's about to get caught, she tries to hide behind the Christmas tree. Let me ask you something, Candace. What do you decorate a Christmas tree with?
Lights. Ornament.
Lights. Like we're gonna focus on lights here.
Okay.
1912. What do you think they're using as lights on a Christmas tree?
I have no clue. What are they using?
I actually,
are they using like gas, like
no.
lanterns?
That would probably be a safer idea. That would probably be a safer thing than what they actually used in this time.
Are they using popcorn?
No, I mean they had like other decorations like that on the tree. This is actually one of those rabbit holes. Like I fell into a good like 2-hour rabbit hole earlier today.
Candles?
Just looking into ding ding ding. Just looking into what they would have used to light their trees back then.
That sounds extremely dangerous.
I mean, especially when you consider they're using real trees that dry out really fast.
Yeah.
There's actually record of lit candles being used to illuminate trees in Germany and France as far back as the 17th century. By the time the Victorian era came around, this was more common practice throughout the world. So in 1912, stringed lights did exist. They're actually like Thomas Edison invented stringed lights as early as, I mean, this was like several decades before this. They do exist. But again, like these sorts of like electrical items, like they're very scarce. They're expensive.
They're for like fancy ass folks.
And even though this is a doctor, like this is a small town. Most of the time, if you were seeing Christmas lights, they were usually in like shop windows around the holidays or reserved for like events or like public displays. So it was very rare that people had Christmas lights decorating their tree. So they actually lit their trees with candles.
Idiots.
Dumbasses. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine like we don't even use a real tree because like it's just such a pain in the ass. Like it dries out so fast. Even with the string lights, modern LED string lights that we have now, like I still worry that gets too hot and all it takes is one of those little like dry ass needles.
At least blow them
fire
out before you go to bed or something.
And who knows, maybe this little girl lit one so that she could like see in the room. That could be, maybe what happened.
The real story.
That ends up being her downfall. So yeah, you guys got a brief history lesson on, what in Victorian times they used to decorate their trees with. It was in fact lit candles. So when Rachel jumped behind the tree trying to hide, she got too close to an open flame, knocked it over, and caught her dress on fire. This fire spreads, engulfing the entire room before it was finally extinguished. Rachel was rescued from the room and initially survived the burn injuries she had received. She was brought up to her room and laid in the bed where she passed away after 2 days of languishing.
Oh my gosh.
So
That's so
she
sad.
survived. Like, yeah, she's just being a kid, snooping on her Christmas presents, trying to, like, shake the boxes or whatever and see what's inside. She thinks she's about to get caught. And for our kids, like, they're just like, oh, I'm just down here using the bathroom or getting a drink. But for this poor child, she was scared, tries to hide behind the tree, knocks this candle over, catches her dress on fire, which then spreads.
That's so sad. She was just a baby.
10 years old at this point. So, I mean, there's a reason that the mortality rates are so different now versus then. There was just a lot more, like, things even in the house that would just kill you.
That's so sad.
Sometime after Rachel's death, the Gibbons family adopted 2 more children. Helen, who was the person I had mentioned, is actually in the census reports. We have record of Helen. And then, what was the other one?
Elizabeth?
Yes. So they were adopted sometime after the death of Rachel. Elizabeth was adopted as an infant sometime around 1934. So this is almost 20, like a little over 20 years later. That Elizabeth is adopted.
Okay.
So I don't know how long they've had. I think that they adopted Helen like very shortly after Rachel died. This is like 20 something years later. They're getting on in age a little bit more, like the doctor and his wife.
So they're just still adopting kids.
Yeah, I mean, they're just doing their charity. They've got the money and the resources to take care of kids. They're gonna. So they adopt baby Elizabeth sometime around 1934. Not long after the adoption of baby Elizabeth, she passed away in her crib by her mother's bedside at only 10 months old.
Oh my gosh. The
cause of death is unknown. I mean, you could probably imagine any number of sicknesses or what is the disease that we call now?
The SIDS, the sudden infant death syndrome.
So it could very well have been anything like that.
Yeah.
Jessie Gibbons, the mother, the grief-stricken mother, would develop a severe case of double pneumonia only 2 weeks later. She died shortly after in May of 1934, lying in the same room where she had just lost her infant child.
Oh, no.
So this family has already been, just kind of like really, really struck by just the worst luck. Just awful. Interesting fact, and this is kind of a, related to the subject, but kind of a little bit of a caveat. Jessie, so when Jessie, the mother, died, all of her like funeral preparations and services were done in their home. And I thought that was such an interesting thing. Like, could you imagine like one of us dying and our body like being prepared and funeral services being held in our home?
I feel like that was pretty common at that time. I don't know when that stopped being a thing.
The preparations too. Like, and I don't know. Like, I guess they're not doing a full on embalming at this point. Probably. I don't know.
And it makes sense too because I mean the father is a doctor. That's probably, he has a lot of medical knowledge. That probably would be the type of place that you would want to do something like that. I don't know. Maybe they were just set up well for it.
Yeah.
That is a weird thought to think of that. And it's really creepy.
She wasn't buried at the home, but I mean, it's still like, that's kind of a weird thought to like, oh yeah, you just prepped my body and held my funeral service. I got in a wake or whatever. Sure. I don't know. I guess it's just more common to use like a funeral home, or I guess like those are more, like that's very much corporate America these days anyway.
Yeah.
So a few years after Jessie's death, there was an insanity inquest filed against Dr. John Gibbons, stating that he was a danger to himself and to others. So essentially, this is a legal process that was put in place by somebody stating that he was unfit to be a doctor and questioning his sanity. And we'll kind of get into what was going on with that. But one of the people to initiate the inquest and try to have him committed was his own brother, Dr. George Gibbons. So there's some shit going on in this family there. They're not trusting each other. Like this guy's already, he's been through a lot, losing 2 children and his wife. Maybe the family's starting to question who's at fault here. I don't know.
I mean, maybe he did go crazy after that. Who knows?
I mean, yeah.
Maybe he needs some like a personal leave or something. Like give him a break.
So he gets his break during the insanity inquest. The American Medical Association comes in and they confiscate all of his medical records, his equipment, and they force him into retirement. So this is short. Like I said, this is shortly after his wife's death. I believe he's in his 60s right now. So or probably early-ish 60s. And so there were a number of comments in the inquest, just people who had like kind of petitioned as well to have his license suspended and all of this, who like went through this public court battle essentially. There were comments and basically stating that Dr. Gibbons had lost feeling in one of his hands, and this was one of the reasons that they were trying to get his license taken away from him, because he was still working, like he was still operating on people. And if you don't have feeling in one of your hands, like that's you're gonna fuck up.
That is very concerning. I would like 100% agree with that. Then
by this point, he's getting a little bit on in his years. He was accused of becoming senile. It was said that he would walk around town in his pajamas carrying a gun and threatening people, threatening to kill people in his pajamas. I think that he's just, very grief stricken, gone through a lot, and his mind is not all there. There's a lot of stress, a lot of trauma. Who knows what could have triggered this? But I mean, even in those days, probably shouldn't be walking around town threatening people with a gun. I'd hope that people wouldn't be doing that now, but we're still having this conversation. And rumor has it that Dr. Gibbons was also a womanizer who took liberties with female patients.
Oh, no.
So this is where, you get into this part of the story and suddenly you're not so much thinking about, this dad who's like lost his entire world. Like something here, like something seems not right.
I don't feel bad for him anymore.
So you've got these women kind of coming out at this point stating that, he's taken liberties with patients and kind of just taking advantage of them. Dr. Gibbons ultimately, he lost his license. And he was forced to retire after 27 years of practicing medicine in this home. He ended up not being like committed or anything like or hospitalized as a result, but he did lose his license. And within 10 years of this, 10 years after his wife died, Dr. Gibbons does pass away on July 6th, 1944. And he was 71 years old. No record as to his cause of death. He did pass away in the home.
That's crazy that there's no record of it at that time. Like that's getting on in years.
I mean, 1944, like it is kind of getting like there's so I was able to find his obituary and death certificate, but it doesn't state like cause of death. So I was unable. It might be out there somewhere. I was unable to find it. So listeners, if you want to tell me what killed Dr. John Gibbons, reach out. But I think I can just imagine at the age of 71 already having like a lot of just like senile and like maybe dementia. Who knows what could have been going on with him? Like I can imagine just all the things that are probably like just failing with this person, like physically and mentally at this point. So yeah, I mean, given this time period in the medical field, it's likely that many patients also died in the home during the entirety of his practice there. There's stories of subsequent occupants that suggest that others encountered their demise in the home. The most recent deaths in the home are of a father who died in the upstairs bathroom in 1966 and his son who had special needs who fell down the front staircase in 1974.
Oh my gosh.
When I say upstairs, I'm not talking about like the second floor where like where Rachel and Elizabeth and like all those bedrooms and stuff, where there was actually and this is where it gets a little confusing. It's like the third floor, the attic was actually converted into a servant's quarters.
Okay.
So there was a bathroom and a bedroom up there. And
probably some steep ass stairs like going down.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly the details around this, but yeah, within a couple of years of each other, this father and son both died in the home. And that's the most recent occurrence that I was able to find. So it is said that Whispers Estate is home to around 24 spirits, among other entities.
Oh. What other entities?
We'll get into that. So, I mean, at this point, I'm kind of past like the actual the main story of it. We're gonna kind of talk about like just some of the actual history and facts that back up some of this, as well as things that are like like some of the lore around this home today and what people are saying about it, and just kind of getting into a little bit just what some people are saying that they've experienced in the home, and and whatnot. Is there anything about the story that, you have any questions on, or like anything that like you're like, I don't know, like even if it's not questions, like do you have any comments on it, or is there anything that's sparking your mind and getting it going?
Well, I'm just curious. I was wondering when you mentioned that he died of, unlisted
Causes
reasons.
unknown.
Was it the result of a haunting or another entity
I don't know.
haunting him? That was the first thing that came to my mind.
And even if in the literal term of like, when you think like being haunted by ghosts or whatever, a lot of people like they think like, ooh, spooky, floating apparitions. But like, ghosts can be just bad memories. Ghosts can be
Yeah.
like the past mistakes, the shit that you've done to fuck up your life.
That could have haunted him to his death.
I'm sure that he was very haunted at that age. Who the fuck knows? But yeah, I'm not so certain that this guy, and we'll get into it. I don't have a ton of details on the guy, but just some accounts of like things from people in the town,
Yeah.
things that they've commented on Dr. Gibbons over the years. So yeah, we'll kind of move into that portion of it. So to kick this part off, Whispers Estate is named Whispers Estate because of one of the most common paranormal occurrences in the home, which is hearing whispering in your ears and coming from the walls.
Oh, gross.
People seem like they literally on just like the very tip of their ear, like they will hear and they can feel like the breath, like whispering something into their ears. People hear it coming from the walls. So that's where it gets its name from. This house has passed ownership a lot. One of the most recent owners, he, because there are a lot of there's a lot of inconsistencies in some of the stories and not a lot of facts and documents to back up some of it. So he was trying to figure out, like, was Rachel a real person? And what happened, like what really happened to her? So he hired a couple of psychics, not together, like separate psychics. They came to their own investigation. And based on their investigation, there were a few common things that they had both kind of reported on. The psychics claimed, first off, before we get into the Rachel stuff, that there were up to 4 unmarked graves in the backyard. So this is like unmarked, like probably not supposed to be there. Like, and who knows if this is even real? It's not been, what is it, exhumed? Is that the
right? Yeah.
No one's going out there with a shovel in the backyard of this house, digging up holes, trying to.
But I mean, he was a doctor.
Yeah.
You never know what could have gone awry.
So like they claimed that there were up to 4 unmarked graves in the backyard, not including what they're calling a pit grave containing amputated limbs, internal organs, and aborted fetuses.
Ooh.
From just the operations of this hospital over the years.
So maybe he didn't know how to dispose of these.
I mean, back in the turn of the century, it's probably exactly what he was doing, was burying them, because I don't think that he had a way of, incinerating at this point any of this stuff.
What do you
do with that kind of like, I don't even know where to put my batteries when they die. Like, right. Do I throw them in the trash, or do I take them to that little slot at the front of Best Buy? Like, I wouldn't know what to do with an organ.
Ooh, I do not like the thought of having a pit of organs and limbs and fetuses in my backyard.
Shit's fucked up.
That's like just breeding grounds for haunting.
It's just like, hey, please come have all the fun here, ghosts, demons. So yeah, these psychics were asked to investigate the Rachel story specifically, because there was a lack of evidence. Most of the conflicting reports were based around the fire that was in the home. So there are some documentations of the fire, but it's kind of conflicting, like where the fire happened, whether or not first off, like whether or not the door to the parlor was closed or open, and whether or not she was trapped. And like there's just some conflicting reports around that. So basically the story, like they have their seance or whatever, and these psychics reach out to Rachel, and they concluded, basically came up with this alternate story that supposedly Rachel has told them. According to the psychics, Rachel was not trying to sneak a peek at Christmas gifts, but had instead been snooping in her father's office, and she took a vial of ether.
Ooh.
Not really knowing what it is. I mean, a 10-year-old kid, like just getting into shit, being curious, like, oh, I'm going to sneak into my dad's office, go through his cabinets. Oh, there's this cool looking vial. I wonder what this is.
So did she blow it up?
She takes it out of, no, she doesn't blow it up. I'm sure that that probably leads to the fire expanding. But she takes it out of her dad's office, up into the parlor, probably just like, ooh, what is this? Kind of like playing or whatever. And obviously, you know what ether was used for back in those days.
Yeah, it puts you to sleep. It's like
Exactly.
anesthesia.
It's an anesthetic, like from back in the like. So she opens it up, takes a big sniff of it.
So it knocks her out.
So essentially, yeah, like that like concentrated of a sniff, like right up to this bottle, this vial of ether. It renders her unconscious, and she falls back, knocking over a candle that was in the room and starting the fire. And I'm sure that ether, I don't know if ether is flammable.
It's extremely
so
flammable.
That probably led to the fire. So the fire is a real thing. Like, and I'll kind of like at this stage kind of get into like the things that like this is fact. This happened versus this is something that like, you know, it could just be like legend over the years. It's kind of been added on to it. So the Gibbons, obviously they're real. The house, it's real. There was a fire in 1910. There are conflicting reports about what exactly that fire was, though. Not good enough records on like, you know, what the cause of fire was and what all was involved with that. So the psychics also stated that while Rachel was on her deathbed, her father gave her an increasing doses of morphine, not to ease the pain that she was in, but it was an attempt to push her toward death as she was seen as damaged goods at that point. She was no longer the prized child. So the dad was basically, I mean, according to the psychics, the dad saw this as like, oh shit, like she's probably going to die anyway. Like, I don't want to take care of this kid. Like I just want to move on, adopt another kid. Essentially was kind of what they were saying.
That's a horrible thought.
Basically used this morphine to overdose her. Is apparently what her ghost is like slinging those rumors in the afterlife.
I hope that her ghost is slinging ether bombs like at everyone. Just kidding. I hope that she did that to him, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
If that's true. I'm just taking the psychic's word. Like,
I mean, they're very trustworthy people. If you know, if you're a psychic, come on the show. We'll talk to you. So yeah, there's a lot of disputed facts around the history of Dr. Gibbons and what kind of person he was as well. There are articles suggesting that he was a good and benevolent individual. But of course, these articles were written by Dr. John Gibbons himself. So, I mean, I can go around saying like, "Hey, I'm the best guy ever."
Yeah,
I could do that. But apparently, that was not how the people of the town felt about him. There was a lot of rumors around town that he was a bad doctor. Townsfolk recall that when they were kids, they were told to stay away from the doctor's house. The Gibbons' daughter, Helen, is the only child that there is actual record of. So, you know, it could be that Rachel and Elizabeth never existed, or it could just be down to inaccurate records.
They could be like more like foster kids too. Maybe they weren't like officially.
Who knows? I'm just going with it. But regardless, Rachel is a guest favorite of this home. So the current owner, he does. You can do haunted tours of the home. You can stay in the home as like kind of like a bed and breakfast. Like they do overnight like bookings of this house, and you can do your own investigation. So Rachel is a guest favorite.
Okay.
She is described as a good spirit, and when she interacts, she has a calm nature as a little girl would.
So she's not throwing ether bombs.
No, she's not.
Guests. Okay.
She's not throwing the ether bombs. Guests seem drawn to her in a paternal way. So I think that people are very caring of her. There's you know, like they'll often go into her room during the investigation at nighttime just to, you know, tell her good night.
That makes me feel so shivery.
Yeah. It's also common for investigators to donate dolls to Rachel's room. So there's a collection sitting on Rachel's bed, what they believe is Rachel's bed. There's a collection of dolls sitting in her room that people have donated over time. And apparently Rachel will interact with these dolls. Some of them have, you know, vocal boxes that she'll set off. Some of them like, you know, she's just playing with her toys.
That's so creepy.
She's just playing with her toys. There's a story about one of the first dolls that was donated to Rachel. And this one I thought was kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a cool little story. So this lady Nancy brought one of these first dolls to Rachel to donate to the house, and she left it sitting on Rachel's bed. Nancy was there doing an investigation with the homeowner. They left the room at this point and went about their investigation. And after hours of not really like turning up anything, like nothing happening, no activity, she was about to leave. So she goes up to the room to tell Rachel goodnight before she heads out, because that's something that a lot of people did. And when she gets up there, she notices that the doll is gone. Her and the owner were the only people in the homes, and they spent some time looking for the doll for a good like half hour or so, couldn't find it. So they don't find it that night. She comes back for another investigation about 3 months later. The owner still hasn't found the doll. Like, they've been looking for it. In the middle of this investigation, they hear a loud commotion coming from Rachel's room. So they immediately go up to check it out. And they don't see anything in the room. But because there was activity happening recently, Nancy takes it upon herself to ask Rachel what happened to the doll that she brought in this moment. So she asks, like, what did you do with this doll? Where is it? And at that point, the doll is thrown down the stairs, which is behind them. So they're standing in the doorway to this bedroom. The stairs going to the downstairs like parlor area is behind them. So the doll is thrown down the stairs, and it's cool to the touch, but it smells like it's been recently burned, and it is charred. This doll looks like it's like
it looks charred.
Yes, this doll has been burnt, even though it's cool to the touch at the point that they're able to pick it up.
So that can't be Rachel that did that. Like, why would she do that?
I don't know.
So that makes me feel like it's like one of the bad spirits.
Jealous that Rachel's getting all of this attention, that somebody brought her a gift. So yeah, who knows? But this doll is now sitting in a case in Rachel's bedroom, on display. Thought that was a cool kind of like,
that is a really
feels
cool
like
one.
an Annabelle-esque story. Common activity based around Rachel include hearing her sing, giggling, or skipping and playing. I mentioned that she will interact with these dolls. She has there's 2 balls that they keep in her room that she will sometimes play with. You'll hear them bouncing across the floor. She'll throw them. Just different things like that. Like she's playing like a kid would.
So it's all good fun, but still like the most creepy things to ever hear. Like children giggling.
Us, yes.
Yeah.
But she's having a good old time.
Little girls laughing.
Yeah. So some have even reported seeing this little girl with long brown hair and a white dress sitting and kicking her legs as if she were waiting. So kind of just propped up at the kitchen table, swinging her legs back and forth like kids do.
People have seen this?
They have seen.
Wow.
They have seen.
That's a bold claim.
That's a bold claim. And there's a few photos. Like if you, I'll take this time to mention a couple of the sources that I've pulled stuff from. There was a pretty cool about 50 minute long documentary that I actually ended up watching on YouTube called When the Walls Talk. It's by a producer named a channel called Timeline. That was where a bulk of this came from. I also got there were a couple of news articles written in the town of Mitchell, and a few other just journalistic organizations around Indiana. Journey Indiana was one of them. The Times Mail. So I don't know, I can put those in the show notes. You guys can check them out for yourself. Definitely check out the YouTube documentary. I think that one's worth a watch. But,
I definitely want to check out that documentary now.
Yeah, there's quite a, like if you go onto YouTube and you search Whispers Estate, you find quite a bit actually. But this is a more this is a more famous house than I thought.
I can't believe I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's been featured on there's books written about it. There are TV series, there have been pitched films for this house. It's known as one of the most haunted places in Indiana. The Travel Channel actually lists it as the 4th most terrifying place in the United States. Not
Seriously?
Haunted, the 4th most terrifying place in the United States.
Okay, now we have to go.
Oh, I mean, it's not that far from us.
It's really not. We have to go stay a night in there and do our own investigation.
So let's get a little bit more into some of the other haunted occurrences that supposedly happened in this house. So, Rachel, she's a nice ghost. Nothing too crazy there. Then you get into Jesse's room, the mother.
Okay.
So still nothing necessarily sinister. Definitely starts to get a little creepier. So in Jesse's room, people have reported hearing crying of like baby Elizabeth crying, as you would. Baby died in there. 10 months old, still crying, still, like waking up in the middle of the night. They can also smell baby powder in the room from time to time. Like it whiffs of like just like that kind of like talcum, like kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
smell. Guests sleeping in the room, however, are often woken up to labored breathing and coughing. Some report feeling as if someone is sitting on their chest.
Oh,
So
that's
remember,
not cool.
yeah, Jesse died of double pneumonia. So pneumonia in both lungs.
What makes me think, maybe the baby was also sick and that's why the baby died.
It
Who
could
knows?
be.
Like maybe they
Who
were
knows?
passing some type of a sickness around.
A lot of the whispering in the ears actually comes from Dr. Gibbons himself.
I don't like that. That's
think about what I've already told you about, like, some of the accusations that were coming out from some of the women and past patients. Typically, this whispering happens to young women who are visiting the home.
That's terrifying.
A lot of times, this whispering is followed up by grabbing and groping.
Oh, no.
So even in the afterlife, Dr. Gibbons is being a perverted freak.
So he didn't learn his lesson. He's still being nasty.
He passed away in his old age. He's popping a feel. So even though like the groping and whatnot, that might make people feel a little uncomfortable, and obviously some of this like the kid just kind of giggling and having fun, like those are seen as very terrifying and creepy things to those who are not ghosts. There is like those are harmless interactions, but there's something far more sinister in the home that is probably behind the physical scratching, bruising, pushing, and more towards guests. So there have been countless records of people getting large gashes on their back, like cuts, like pictures that people like post of this happening during their investigations. Specifically, people being pushed down the stairs.
Do you think that's what killed the one son?
I don't know. Maybe
in the home.
There's no record as far as like how far back the paranormal activities in this home occurred. But who knows? That could be part of it. So yeah, like there have been the current owner of the home himself has been pushed down the stairs coming from the attic down to the second floor, to the point where he was hospitalized. I saw some photos and video of like the large gash that he had in his head from being pushed down the stairs. He refuses to go into the house alone at night anymore. Owns the house, won't go into it at nighttime anymore. There was another guest who, like they got footage of it. It could have been that she threw herself. I don't know. It was kind of fishy looking, but claims that she was kind of like thrown from the stairs toward the doorway that it's leading to.
Dude, if someone did throw themselves, like, come on, really? That's not helping to prove that there's paranormal activity if that's what your motivation is. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just proving the opposite. Like, it's giving more clout to the people that, doubt and don't believe.
So, I mean, all of that to say that, like, I'm a pretty skeptical person. I approach like seeing people's evidence and proof or whatever. I approach that with skepticism. I'm a non-believer in that sense. We talked about that in the last episode. I reiterated that before I started this story. There was a clip that I saw of somebody doing what's called a table tipping, or a tipping table.
A tipping table.
So it essentially, it works kind of like, I mean, you think of like a Ouija board or a spirit box or any kind of like communication tool like that, where you're asking the spirits a question. Essentially, there is this kind of small, like the small 3-legged table that like people are all sat around, and they've got their fingertips just their fingertips on the very edge of this table, and they're asking questions, and the table is kind of like interacting in ways based on what they're asking. And I don't know exactly how it works as far as like the format you're supposed to ask the questions in and what different things mean. I didn't really get into that, but I saw this video of this happening, and it's very clear. Everybody's fingertips only are touching this. Nope. Like if they're putting pressure on it, it's pushing down. This
Okay.
table is
So they're not like elbows on the table,
no,
leaning
nothing like
all
that.
over
It's literally
it.
it is a small table between a group of like 6 people, and their fingertips only are on it. And this thing it's like scooting around everywhere. It's like moving in different directions. So that's to me like it's hard to like do that sort of trick with like any sort of mechanism because it's going in different directions. At one point, the table pins itself up against one of the people that are a part of the investigation. He can't even scoot his chair back to get away from the table. His chair is also stuck, and this table is pinning him, and he's just trapped there. And eventually, as they're trying to help him, the table pushes into like in the opposite direction into another lady who's on the other end and pushes her over. And like it looked crazy. I don't know if I believe, but I can see like that is hard to explain how the hell that's happening when the people's fingertips are the only thing touching this table. Their thumbs are up, fingertips only on the top of this table. I'm a skeptic. That was hard for me to explain.
I kind of want to watch it and try and debunk it, but
I watched it a few times, so maybe we'll watch it together and kind of see what's going on with it. But
we should link it too here so the listeners can watch it as well and see if they can debunk what's going on.
It might have been a part of the documentary, so just watch the documentary.
Okay.
If not, I'll link it as a separate video if it ends up that it's not. But yeah, there's some really bad evidence out there, and there's some really good evidence. It's at least compelling. It makes you kind of question, like, what am I seeing? Like, and I think that's all you could really hope for. I would say 90% of the people out there who are ghost hunters or paranormal like investigators are full of shit. That's not to say that people haven't experienced things that to them are very real. And I will not discredit that. Like even if there isn't a ghost, what you're feeling is real. And that's what a haunting is.
I 100% agree with that. Sometimes you get some unexplainable feelings that just feel off. And I count that as, feeling some type of weird energy. So I don't know if it's a ghost or, just some type of a haunting. But yeah, I would love to go stay there. And if we ever do, we should do a separate episode just about our stay there.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be so
we'll
fun.
Probably be videotape. That'll be a whole different. That's an investigative video
we'll
or a
be
vlog.
Vlogging, guys.
We'll be.
I'll let
What's
you
up,
know.
everybody?
I'll let you know if I get any weird
Smash that like button.
Fishy lip whispers in my ear from the doctor.
Yeah.
Gross.
Oh man, sorry, I'm still stuck on like just like the just ridiculous like paranormal investigators that are out there. Like you get like it's usually like a group of 3 guys with like they all have like their faux hawks and like Ed Hardy jeans.
I was just gonna say that.
Like, dude, you just touched my butt, bro.
They still have bleached tips for some reason.
They all look like Guy
hair.
Fieri on a very greasy day.
Yeah. Sorry, Guy Fieri. But they're so good to watch, though. You can't. It's good. Entertainment.
It's shit fun.
Yeah,
it
is shit.
Bad television in the worst way, and that's why we like it. It's trash TV. So going back to there is something more sinister in this house than just the kind of harmless ghosts that are happening here. The psychics that we mentioned before, they claim that the house has what they call a vortex or a portal that stretches from the parlor downstairs all the way up to the attic and even extends beyond the house. So as you're leaving the house, there is a church, not like kind of across the street. This extends toward the church as well. So this is like basically like think of it as like, so there is a center to this vortex that is in the house, but there's essentially these cracks is what they describe them as, beyond like basically these cracks in this portal that extend throughout the house and even outside of the home toward this church, is like where they feel this energy essentially. So this portal, it culminates in what they call the spiritual heart of the home, which is in the attic upstairs. So that servants' quarters attic that's up there. This tends to be where some of the more violent stuff happens. As far as people getting hurt, people
yeeted down the
stairs, leaving there. People who are brave enough to stay up there, they get some pretty fucked up nightmares thrown on them, and people being pulled off beds and like that sort of like paranormal activity sort of shit.
If I just have to say, if you and I went to stay there and we were brave enough to stay in the attic room, I would be sliding down the stairs on my butt. Like
just scooting
not
down
walking
one at a time.
I would be like a
dog who's got
3-year-old.
a little turd.
No, I'd be
caught on
like
their
going
butt.
down like a 3-year-old, like sit on your bottom when you go down the stairs.
Oh man. Yeah, something like that.
Let's see you throw me down the stairs now, bitch.
I would definitely be like very, very well, and that's the thing. So like the current owner who was thrown down, like he said that happened as a result of him almost being like too cocky and too like, oh yeah, I've walked up and down these stairs a million times, like nothing's gonna get me. Like he almost got too cocky about it, and that's when he said like the worst stuff tends to happen to him is when he's too overconfident in the home, so and the ghosts like want to teach him a lesson.
Yeah, then be overcautious. I would just slide down the stairs on my booty.
Going back to this vortex or portal or however you want to explain it, this kind of ties into there's an entity in the home that people are referring to as Big Black because it's usually spotted as a shadow. Other people have described it as more of a rake-like creature, which I mean, we could probably have an episode down the road where we get into like these kind of mythical and creepy monsters and stuff. A rake is essentially this kind of like humanoid, like flesh creature with these long arms, and it kind of like, I don't know, it has like a small like bent legs and kind of like almost like gorilla style, but these like long arms, and it's so fast, and people get glimpses of it. I believe that the origins of the rake, it was a creepypasta sort of story, like online. You can go look up that for yourself. Enjoy your nightmare fuel. It's very, very, very nightmare inducing. But yes, so like some people have referred to it as a shadow. Some people are referring to it as an actual like physical creature that they've seen in the home. But a lot of people tend to believe that this creature, this entity, is very much tied to this vortex or this spiritual heart, like this portal that has been opened in this home, and that would explain why it's not just ghosts. There is something beyond that present in the home, and maybe the amount of ghosts that are in the house, maybe that weakens the mortal plane enough to where this portal is able to open, and that kind of just opens the doors for the real shit show.
Well, there's definitely been a lot of death there, like probably so much undocumented death between all of the people. Who knows how many people died during surgeries. Well, all of the accidents that happened.
That's down on the first floor where the doctor was operating from. The psychics, as they were like doing their investigation into the portal, they said that the attic, the third floor, reeks of death and rebirth. So rebirth. So like when you die, like the rebirth is in like these are spirits now, like they're born as something entirely different.
So was this doctor like secretly killing people in the attic?
Who the hell knows? This could be from, we don't know. We have no record of the guy the doctor that owned the house before this doctor.
He got the hell out of there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if anything spooky was happening there. There's also a large chunk of time between 1944 when Dr. Gibbons passed away and the deaths that I mentioned in the late 60s, early 70s, like where we don't really have like, I mean, I don't have any record of anyone like necessarily dying, but there were other homeowners in that time. So who knows like what it seems like all of this is coming from this servant's quarters attic bedroom is where all this kind of like comes from. So yeah, a portal could explain the presence of Big Black, this shadowy figure.
I don't like the idea of Big Black or the rake thing.
Yeah.
With the long fleshy arm.
There are 6 confirmed deaths in the home, many more rumored, 24 experienced spirits, and a demonic entity in this home. So do with that what you will. Like I said, like there's probably, just because it was a physician's office, there are probably so many more people who also died in this home that there's just not record of, or it happens. Like back then, like medicine wasn't that great. I wouldn't be surprised if dozens and dozens of people died in this home.
Oh, I hate that thought. That's enough to make anyone go crazy.
So yeah, go book your stay. We might.
I think we will. Date night.
Date night. Date death.
I love that story. Well, I don't love all the things that happen to the people there, but I just love that I have never heard that story, and it's pretty close to us. Yeah. It's just within a few hours away.
Couple hour drive. Yeah. So like I said, like, I mean, it's one that I had heard, kind of just stories about growing up in Indiana. I, didn't know like a whole lot of details about it, but it's like one of those just kind of like folklore, like urban legend type things. And it changes from person to person. And especially the further away from where it happened, it gets, it kind of like, now that the internet's a thing, like I feel like there's more consistent stories around it, but
Yeah, not so many morphing legends like evolving. It's
one of the things that I was going to get into before I started the story is like, like every town has like their things, and a lot of these towns have common things like a crybaby bridge or something like that, where everyone's got a bridge where a baby was thrown from the bridge and the grieving mother hung herself, and now you can, if you turn your car off on the bridge at midnight, you hear the babies crying and your car won't start back up. And everyone's got a story like that.
Isn't it funny that like every state has that?
It's not even, it's like every corner of every state. Yeah. Like every town has
People
something.
Are just bored. They like to invent fun stories.
That's the thing about urban legends. They spread, and suddenly it's from your town, or suddenly it happened to somebody you know, or suddenly like it's good storytelling that has really stuck with people, so they spread it.
It's fun.
Yeah. So that's my story. Looking forward to hearing yours.
I liked it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Wink. Sorry, I'm taking a drink.
It's okay. I had to sniff. Anyways, okay. Yeah, the allergies just and colds won't leave our house, so I apologize for how my voice sounds.
How my voice
sounds. I'll try not to sniff except for that one time. And so my story is extremely close to home. And by extremely, I mean it's about a mile down the road at
Taco Bell?
The Golden Lamb.
Ooh, R.I.P.
The Golden Lamb is located in Lebanon, Ohio. And it's about a 30-minute drive. Well, now we have cars. So for us nowadays, it's about a 30-minute drive north of Cincinnati. So the Golden Lamb actually opened its doors in 1803. It's a really long time ago. And the inn and the restaurant within the Golden Lamb is the oldest operating business in Ohio. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
It is the oldest operating business, like official licensed business in Ohio.
So when you, is it like oldest that's still around, or oldest period?
It is the oldest that's still around.
Okay.
So obviously there were other business.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Longest operating.
It is still operating to this day. Although the Golden Lamb is not its original name. So it was originally a wooden building. It's on the corner of Broadway and Main Street, right in town. It's in the heart of downtown Lebanon. It was kind of more of a modest building when it started out. It had many gardens in the back. It had many stables for livestock. And basically, the family who started it, created it as a place that they lived, but also to make money from the people who would come through on the stagecoach route. So there was a main stagecoach route from Cincinnati to Sandusky, and it would run twice a week. So it would come through this main route on this main road path, twice a week. And it would be a great way for businessmen who maybe lived in Lebanon to get down to Cincinnati, or vice versa. Or if you just needed to travel up for work, somewhere else, it was just a great path and way that people used as more of a early transportation. So this was before, people were using trains and all of that in this town. So they mainly used this stagecoach. Years later, it changed ownership many, many times, just like your whispering house. It was later rebuilt into the 4-story architecture that it's known for today. So, it looks like a very grand building now. It has really grand pillars. It's one of the tallest buildings in town. It just looks very, very neat. The architecture of its time really shows through today. So when you walk by it, you kind of feel like you're sucked back in time. It's just a really cool building. Before it was known as the Golden Lamb, it had names such as the Bradley House, the Lebanon House, the Stubbs House, depending on who owned it. And then it finally became the Golden Lamb because back in those times, many of the visitors that would come through town and on the route were actually illiterate and they couldn't read. And because of this, the owners had always kept a symbol of a lamb, of a golden lamb on the sign, just more, as a symbol for people to know and reference where they were. So word would spread and they would say, oh, the building or the inn with the lamb. That way people knew who they were. So I thought that was kind of a fun fact about it. I didn't
Little
know
factoid,
that that's
kinda
how
where the name comes from.
Yeah. So like I said, it was a really popular stop along the stagecoach line. And because of that, many high-end businessmen, lawyers, a lot of very, famous people stayed there. There were many soldiers that would come through nearing the War of 1812. It hosted many, many soldiers. And at the time, there was actually no theater or house of entertainment in town. So it also doubled as the nightlife and the entertainment. So it was actually considered Lebanon's first theater. So they had what they called freak shows there at the inn. And I actually found online an old flyer, like a photo of a very old flyer from the Lebanon Historical Society showing, advertising the freak shows and the singers and, other performers that would come to stay. Other people that would stay there were 12 of our U.S. presidents actually stayed there, and they've named several rooms after some of those presidents, one of them being Abraham Lincoln.
Good old Honest Abe.
Yeah. So if you go there, you can stay in the room where Abraham Lincoln and his family stayed. Other famous people like authors Charles Dickens and Harriet Beecher Stowe stayed there. Charles Dickens was reportedly not a fan of the Golden Lamb. When he stayed there, it was during his first trip to the Americas. And during that time, during the daytime when they're not kind of advertising their nightlife, secret activities, it was during the temperance movement. And they only offered coffee and tea to drink. And it was actually...
I need something a little stronger than that.
Yeah, so that's basically, it's recorded in his private journal. He references the Lebanon Inn and says something along the lines of, these Americans shove just intolerable drinks down your throat. So he was not a fan. Like, he wanted some whiskey or, he wanted something strong. He did not want this coffee and tea. He's like, ridiculous. So moving on in recent years, the Food Network actually named the Golden Lamb Ohio's most haunted restaurant because many of the guests and employees of the 250-year-old property have given reports of paranormal activity during their stays. Many have said that the spirits of several ghosts will occupy the rooms of the restaurant and hotel. One of the most notable spirits is Clement L. Vallandigham. So this pronunciation is hard.
So is this Old Valyrian that we're speaking here?
It is not Old Valyrian, but I'm going to go ahead and call him Clem, if that's okay.
Good old Clem. Because what is Clem up to these days?
I don't know, but this Clem that I'm talking about did not meet a very good end.
That's an unfortunate name, Clem.
I'm going to call him Clem. Vallandigham is just, with my cold and allergies, it's not rolling off the tongue.
Valendium Leviosa.
So Clem was a celebrated Civil War era U.S. congressman from Ohio.
Not a celibate, a celebrated.
I said celebrated.
Yeah, I know. I was just clarifying.
Okay.
For my own reference.
He was a leader of the Northern anti-war effort known as the Copperheads. also known as Confederate sympathizers. So he was one of those guys. So don't feel too bad for him.
We've got a few of those probably listening to this podcast.
Well, you don't feel too bad for him. He actively fought against rights for Black people and Black suffrage, all of that. And just not very nice. He was very well off. He was a lawyer or a solicitor, as they call it in his time. So he was charged with treason because of this, because of, his position of where he was. He was an Ohio congressman. He should not be a Confederate sympathizer in that time. So after facing the charges of treason for opposing the war effort, Clem was escorted to Tennessee in exile, down to good old Tennessee.
Man, what do you got to do to get kicked out of Ohio and thrown into Tennessee?
Right?
I'll do it right now.
I think they're like, if you want to, not be with us, then get out of town. We're going to kick your ass out of here. And that's what they did. So eventually he's like, I've had enough of Tennessee. He sailed to Canada for a minute, where he started up a campaign to run for Ohio governor again. So he's in exile for a while, goes to Canada with his tail between his legs. He's like, you know what? I'm going to run again. Like when elections are back up, these other sympathizers that are still, riding under the radar, maybe they can back me. Maybe things will change by that time. So he secretly returned to Ohio. This is 1864 at this point.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, he did not win this election. So he is not Ohio congressman again. He is now just working as a lawyer. And he has a lot of money, so he's fine. He has a lot of connections.
Don't feel bad for this guy.
Don't feel bad for him. But he is still back in Ohio at this point, at least, even though he's not a congressman at the time. But years after this, Clem was in Lebanon in a second floor room of the Golden Lamb. And he was staying there because right across the street from the Golden Lamb is the county or the town's courthouse. So he was often doing business in this courthouse, doing trials, representing clients. So the Golden Lamb was a common place for those, lawyers and judges and anyone of importance at that time to go kind of convene.
Well, that was the thing when you had like a meeting place like the courthouse in those days, and you had like those sorts of like trials and things happening. It didn't make sense for you to travel, commute from your home into town so you would stay at an inn, and this was right across the street. Very different times. Very different times. And as we know, like you said, it was hard to commute. So he was staying at the inn with his client and several other people. He was actually representing and preparing a criminal defense case for a man named Thomas McGeehan, who was accused of fatally shooting another man in a saloon brawl in the nearby town of Hamilton, Ohio. So good old Hamilton.
Yeah, if you
want to get
don't
into
know,
some saloon brawls, head over on to Hamilton.
That just sums up Hamilton. No, I'm just jesting all in good fun. I like Hamilton. But so he was, representing this man who apparently shot somebody in a saloon in Hamilton. This client, Tom McGeehan, he felt like he wasn't getting a fair trial in Hamilton because, the papers were writing all about it. He felt like everyone around was really pushing to just sentence him, and he wasn't having it. So he's like, try me in a neighboring town. So that's why they ended up in Lebanon, Ohio. So while demonstrating, how the victim of the brawl could have accidentally shot himself while drawing his pistol instead of being murdered by Tom McGeehan, which was the whole defense they were going for.
Pretty solid defense.
Right. So he's saying, the victim wasn't shot. He was drawing his own pistol in this drunken brawl, and he accidentally shot himself while doing this. Well, he, like a dumbass, Clem, who thought his own weapon was unloaded, fired a bullet into his own stomach. Can you imagine that? Worst lawyer ever. Like, he is the worst. Like, Clem is not doing so good.
No.
So Clem died slowly in that room the following morning on June 1871 at the age of 50 years old. After that, several reports of a man matching his description have been made over the years by guests staying at the hotel and people that work there. They say the same thing every time. They claim to see a ghostly figure walking the halls very slowly and entering that same room that he stayed in all of those years ago. They claim that the man's smoking a cigar, and you can often see him out of the window. If you're outside of the Golden Lamb, you can see him out of the window of the room in which he died when the room will not be occupied. So, people will walk the streets or drive by and see someone through a window, and then employees will note, well, there's nobody staying in here right now.
But
So
I seen him smoking his cigars.
you seen him smoking his cigars. So my only thought is, the next time I drive by, I'm
just
looking
gonna
at
look
all
for that
these
window,
windows.
yeah.
I'm looking for old Clem. But I just found that wild that he shot his own self during that kind of reenactment there. Just a side spoiler alert, the man he was representing never did end up getting prosecuted for that.
Oh, he wasn't convicted for...
They because that all happened, there was a mistrial.
He got lucky.
He
lucky.
He got lucky 3 times.
What?
He was somehow retried like 2 other times, and it never stuck. But eventually, when he got released, after not being able to get convicted for that, he was gunned down in the street. So he was lucky 3 times.
He got his time, of freedom over and over again, even though he did not deserve it.
So the first, common spirit that you'll see if you go stay there is old Clem Vallandigham.
Valerian.
Old Valerian.
Old Clem Valerian. Dragon Rider.
Right.
King of the Andals.
And people do note he doesn't seem like ominous or threatening. He's just very contemplative. He's walking around, smoking his cigar, sitting in the room.
Living his best ghost life.
Yeah, that was the end of his time. There is a second, this is the most commonly seen spirit in the Golden Lamb. It's a girl named Sarah Stubbs. She was one of the resident spirits at the Lamb. And by that, I mean she lived at the Golden Lamb in the late 1800s while her uncle actually ran the inn at that time. So at some point in the 1800s, her uncle, was running the inn. And so she grew up running the halls. This was her home. She had very fond memories of this place. She actually lived to be an old woman. She lived into her old age. And when she was older, she actually moved away from the inn. And she ended up, after the point that she died, people started seeing her ghost as a young girl walking the halls of the hotel that were, the halls that she would walk for many years when she used to stay there. And the reason why they believe that it's Sarah is because there's documented photos of the girl in the hotel. So people know, what she would have looked like at the time. So people will see her and they're like, that's Sarah. That has to be Sarah. That looks just like her. And much of the activity happens in her childhood bedroom, which is another reason that they believe that it's her. And her childhood bedroom was up on the 4th floor. No evil intentions have been reported to be felt from Sarah at all. She's, just having a good time. People believe that, she's back where all of her fond memories as a child were. And that's why a lot of people believe that she appears in the younger version of herself, not the old woman version. one crazy thing is there have been reports from people who have taken photographic evidence of her childhood bed, and they will see in the camera, once you take the photo, a child's dress laid out on the bed, but with their naked eye looking at the bed, there's no dress laying before them.
So this is only in the photo?
This is only in the photo. And a couple of paranormal investigators have
Dude, you
stayed
just touched
there.
my butt, bro.
and they were interviewed by the staff at the Golden Lamb and showed, this photographic evidence. It can't be explained. So the only thing they can think of is it could be Sarah's dress. We don't know. So yeah, to the naked eye, you can't see the dress. The reported apparition often plays up and down the hallways and even sometimes asks other young children to join her, which is a little bit unsettling to some of the parents that stay there.
Hell no.
Hell no. Yeah, so...
You know how like most parents teach their kids not to talk to strangers? Like I teach my kids not to talk to strange kids that are not dressed of our time that come up to them in a hallway and ask them to play.
Exactly.
Don't follow that kid. They will take you straight to hell.
But I mean, kids don't know. Kids see a little girl who looks inviting and they're like, awesome. Like, otherwise I'm bored. But yeah, so there's been several different groups of people where parents will report that their children have asked to go play with the little girl in a white dress. But when the parents look to see who they're talking about, she's not there. So it's happened in the actual inn portion and the restaurant portion. So people will be there eating dinner and their kid will say, hey, can I go play with that little girl over there? And they're like,
Come again?
Who are you talking about? And they're like, that little girl. And they'll be like, I don't know who you're talking about. And they're like, oh, well, she left. So yeah, so all over the hotel, the restaurant, hotel, everywhere.
It's funny, like even going back to my story, it's just the innocent, like these innocent ghosts who are just trying to like, they're enjoying their afterlife and trying to have fun and play, and
they just want to play.
It is the creepiest fucking thing. Period.
To an adult, it sounds so creepy, but when you think about it, it's just an innocent little kid wanting to play.
Can you repeat one more time? What were the years that Sarah Stubbs would have been living?
So she was there
alive, not dead.
She was there all through the late 1800s. I didn't mark down all of the exact years.
Okay. I was just ballpark is fine.
Yeah, it was late 1800s. It wasn't officially reported when she officially left. She spent most of her life there, but then at some point
left. You know what? So far, Ohio seems to be taking better records in the 1800s than Indiana was in the early 1900s in my story. So you got me there.
Yeah, it can be hard to track down some of these people's lives. But yeah, ballpark, it gives us about the late 1800s. But yeah, so Sarah Stubbs, even though a lot of the adults can't see her, they have commented that they will hear her giggling outside of their doors. And when they open the door, of course, nothing's there. So I don't know. Is that them getting in their heads about hearing Sarah Stubbs, stories of Sarah Stubbs, or are they hearing her giggling outside the door?
I don't know, but if I were ever to have to like, what's that called when you like deliver like legal papers to somebody?
Oh, like serving them.
But if I would use that as a tactic if I ever had to serve somebody, just like stand outside there and like.
That's a good way to get shot or something. You probably shouldn't do that. So, although many people are adamant that the apparition is Sarah Stubbs in her younger form, because they, some people have seen her and she looks just like Sarah Stubbs. Others argue that they believe it's the ghost of a different girl named Eliza Clay. So Eliza was the daughter of Henry Clay, President John Quincy Adams' Secretary of State.
Hey, that name sounded familiar.
And U.S. Senator for Kentucky. So the Clay family was traveling to Washington, D.C. on a route when little Eliza fell extremely ill and it forced the family to have to stop at the Golden Lamb. They weren't planning to stop there. She was, very, very sick. They had to, get a doctor to her. And in those times, they could probably, find a doctor in town that could come help treat her. Unfortunately, Eliza succumbed to the illness at the Golden Lamb, and she died there in one of the rooms. She had to be buried in the Lebanon local cemetery, which was called the Lebanon Pioneer Cemetery, which was far away from her Lexington, Kentucky home. So that one, was pretty sad. So a lot of the people claim, that little girl isn't Sarah Stubbs. This was Eliza Clay. She's stuck here. She didn't mean to be here. She died. Her spirit, didn't get laid to rest where, where her home was. So now this is her new home, and she's trying to play with people.
So what do you think? Are you team Eliza or team Sarah?
It's really hard to say because a lot of people who, have worked there claim that they really think that it's Sarah. But I like the thought of it being Eliza, just because it seems like she's almost, having a good time. She's like trying to play with kids. She's making the best of her situation, if that's really her. But other than, those are just the three main, very notable spirits that you feel when you stay there. Many people over the years have died. So that's why a lot of people, this is considered one of the most haunted hotels in Ohio. It's like first on the list because so many people have died there. And apparently, even though it's a mile from us, I've never stayed there. We've never been there.
We haven't even eaten in the restaurant that's there.
And I really want to. I just, now knowing all these stories, I really, really want to. But apparently just the energy there, especially in the inn portion, is just so heavy. So many people have died. There's so much activity that goes on there at night. There's reported sounds, that housekeeper or the room keepers, claim to hear, just people above them scooting around in the rooms when there's nobody up there. I don't know, but my follow-up is, my initial instinct is to say that because the building is so old, that people may just feel that energy staying there that could make them possibly see or hear things that aren't there. I don't know. What do you think?
So it's one of those stories that, there's just, it's just such a cool story. There's so much history wrapped up into it. And you're right. It's an old place. There's so many people that have whether they died there or not, so many people have come and gone from this place and visited this. There's so many energies mixed into this building. There's so many I don't know.
Basically so much from, what I've researched, so much shit has gone down at this place. So many high profile meetings, deaths have occurred. Many soldiers in the war stayed there. It's just, it has all this heavy feeling. I do like that no one has felt threatened while they stay there. There's nothing, in your story, they're not getting
There's a certain
gashes.
level of innocence there.
They don't feel threatened. Everyone has reported that the spirits seem cordial. There's only been one instance where it's been more of an annoyance, and that is a lot of the workers claim, there's stuffed animals that sit in a certain area behind one of the registers there, and apparently a lot of times they all fly off the shelf onto the floor. So it's not really, ominous, it's more of an annoyance, and they really think that it's Sarah Stubbs pranking them. Because her uncle ran the place, he worked there, she was there, lived there for many years. They think maybe she used to prank people like that, when she was a kid running around. So yeah, it's just things like that aren't ominous. There's no scratchings or, gashes on anybody. No one with ghostly fish lips whispering in your ear.
Hey, it's annoying and ominous. I think that stuffed animals flying off of a shelf, anything like that. Like that shit's scary. One of my first retail jobs when I was in college, I worked at the electronics department in a Kmart, and the toy department was right next to electronics. And as I was like closing up at night, like nobody in the store, we had an entire aisle full of Baby Alives, which I don't know if you're familiar with these dolls, but like they kind of just like you walk past and they have motion sensor, like they'll like make noises and coo at you and like giggle. And sometimes like, and if one of them goes off for whatever reason, like there's like sound sensors and like light sensors, like they will all go off. Like it's an entire row of them, and like that shit used to creep me out.
Well, Rachel from your story would have loved those dolls.
Oh,
like
yeah,
she
man.
could haunt the crap out of those.
Might have been Rachel. It was in Indiana. I don't know.
Maybe. I do want to shout out before I forget. I listened to a podcast about some of the, more of the interesting history about the Golden Lamb and the town. It's a podcast called History Goes Bump, and they research, all different areas, and it's mostly history tied to a little bit of paranormal. So I
mean, it's history with a paranormal twist, kind of like history that leads into folklore and local tales. And I'm very interested in that sort of thing. And I think that if we ever decide that talking about our lives gets stale and what fills people's cups, maybe there's room for us in that area of, historical legend.
I mean, you just said all my favorite things.
We'll stick to the month of October for now.
For now, until we get to spooky Christmas.
Yeah. Spooky Halloween, spooky October is followed up by spooky Thanksgiving, spooky Christmas, spooky President's
Bloody
Day.
Valentine's.
Yeah. Basically, we're trying to keep the spook train going as long as we can. I already said in the last podcast, I'm keeping the Halloween decorations up through Christmas. We're just going full on like, Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh no, it's about to be Christmas. I gotta say, in about 1 week, Christmas tree's going up.
Oh, I love your story, and like I just love hearing about like the history of the town that we're in. It's pretty cool to be like, and I just feel like you're part of that. And I would love to go stay at the Golden Lamb and just kind of like see for myself. If you were to try to book a room there and stay there overnight sometime, what room or what floor would you try to stay on, do you think?
So there are 2 rooms that I think you should stay in. You should ask for the Sarah Stubbs room, which is on the 4th floor. So they've named them actually after the people. You can just straight up say like, hey, I would like Sarah Stubbs' room. I don't know how far out they're booked. Obviously it's 1 room. I don't know like how popular it gets. Or you can straight up stay in Clem's room and ask for him's room. Hymns. Oh my gosh. Ask for Clem's room. Get him's room. No, so I'm kind of bitter that they named the room after him, but I guess he did die in it. I just don't love what he stood for. I think that's why I'm bitter about it. But, I'll let him have his thing. He died there. I get it. You can straight up ask for Clement Vallandigham's room,
Valyrian,
which is on the 2nd
King
floor,
of Vandals,
I believe.
Protector of the realm.
So if you ask for his room on the 2nd floor or Sarah's room on the 4th floor.
I'm sticking with Sarah's room.
I think I will too.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if there's like some invisible dress in the bed.
Oh. Maybe. I mean,
they do keep a creepy doll in her bed.
I'm winking at you.
Oh, like no dress?
Like,
I don't know.
I was just saying, like, I mean, if we have a date night eating down at the Golden Lamb, then we head up to the hotel room and
my dress is invisible. Is that what you mean?
Dress is on the bed.
Oh.
Sorry if any relatives are listening to this.
We just lost them.
I mean, we have kids. You got to know what's going on.
Oh man. But yeah, you should try and book a room in Sarah's room.
We'll look into that, and while we're at it, we'll book a haunted tour of the Whisper Estates.
I think both would be a great stay.
There's a lot of other places around. Like Ohio seems to be one of the most haunted places in the country. Like when I was researching like what story I wanted to tell, I ended up ultimately going back to Indiana and
Yeah,
going
you
with the
went to
story there.
Indiana.
But I was looking into Ohio stories as well. One interesting fact that I never knew prior to looking into this, did you know that Cincinnati has the longest subway system that has never been used?
The underground one?
Yes.
I did know that.
We have the longest subway system, like tunnels, underground tunnels in the world that has never once run a single train.
Just picture what is down there.
Oh, I'm assuming a lot of homeless people,
It's
a lot of
so scary.
feces,
Oof.
a lot of I can imagine that it's not a pretty sight. And there's areas of it I think that are pretty well condemned, and like it's probably hard to get into, but like I'm not trying to get down in that.
I'm not going down there.
There have been talks over the years, and so basically like what happened was around turn of the century, like the public was demanding at the time kind of a public transportation system, because kind of like what Kandace was getting into is like, you couldn't just commute around the city as easily. If you were like needing to get into downtown Cincinnati for like a court hearing or for work related things, like there was no mass transit, so you had to stay down there until you could take a carriage back up to wherever you lived.
And there's a lot of little rural areas in between all of these towns, so it's like
it wasn't all the suburban extended Cincinnati that it is now. So yeah, like they attempted, like they started around the turn of the century building an underground like train transit system, and funding quickly fell apart, and the whole project fell, like essentially the whole project it was a failure, and they abandoned it. So there's just unused subway tunnels under the city of Cincinnati. Over time, they have pushed to get the project up and going. I think that there was a push in like the 1960s, like to start doing so again, just because they're like we're starting to, highway systems were being built at that point. I think that there was a lot more people living in Cincinnati, and just the traffic and congestion was getting so bad that they were like, we need a way to get people to and from the city and around the city that's not blocking up traffic and doing all of that. And I think that they found at that time that it would have just been too expensive, because a lot of the work they had already done, like there are literally parts of downtown Cincinnati, neighborhoods that these tunnels are dug under, that have collapsed in on themselves, and like it's not holding up, and it would have cost way too much to get that project up and going again. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of like a fun little like tidbit that I had no idea that was even there. So I learned something about Cincinnati while I was doing the research on this. I'll probably look into it more a bit, but yeah, there's just so many good haunted stories from right here in Ohio. Indiana had a bunch AF. Too, like the Midwest. Like I don't know. It's this Bible belt of the Midwest, I guess. Like they got a lot of creepy things happening.
Yeah, it was really hard to choose. I ultimately chose the Golden Lamb because it's so close to us, and I found the story really interesting, and any reason to research history is always fun for me. So now we know some cool facts.
We gonna go there. We gonna stay.
And, tomorrow I'm definitely going to drive by and try and see if Clem's peeking out at me.
I'll peep at Clem.
I'll keep you guys updated if he does. And I'm really interested to see which story you guys relate to most or like the most.
I think that they'll like them for different reasons.
Yeah.
I liked yours for different reasons mine was a cool story, but I really enjoyed yours. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for sharing.
Definitely.
It was nice and spooky. You gave me you gave me some good chills.
So we are sticking with kind of spooky and spooky type stories and discussions throughout the month. I've got some ideas for what we're doing for the next episode, but I'm not going to spoil anything yet. So thank you for joining us in this spooky haunted storytelling that we did. I had a lot of fun doing the research and just telling the story, and kind of just shooting the shit with Kandace about haunted things. Thank you for listening in. I'm Justin.
I'm Kandace.
This is the Creepful podcast. Good night. I just heard a ghost.